You're listening to Subsound Radio. We bring you streaming and live broadcasting from the capital. This is the Ep13 podcast. Welcome to the latest episode of the Ep13 podcast. Joining me in studio is Maria. How are you doing today?
I'm very good, thank you.
So where are we sitting at this very moment?
We're at Ep13, which is just outside Letras.
Surrounded by pigeons, Asian massage artists, tourists, police people in funny hats, a statue of a horse made by Galileo. It's quite a rich cultural place, isn't it?
And bells.
And bells. Yeah, we just had to do this take again because the bells in this church behind us. We're doing it incessantly for like 10 or 15 minutes. So we have here former Napoleon residence as well. No?
Yes,
it is.
Yes.
And lots of statues at ground level that were taken from the top of the building, no? Because they're too heavy.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, and they're from the Gothic period, I believe. That's what you said to me.
Yes.
On the first take of this, so I've stolen your knowledge bomb from the first take. I made it my own in the second bomb, but I've given it back to you by acknowledging you there. So
thank you
all
so
is
much.
good. The justice is back. The moral justice of trivia there's a balance, whatever I'm trying to say. Anyway, so here we are again, following on from the last two podcasts that we've made since going back from the holidays. So yes, last week we're talking about what were we talking about last week?
We're talking about translations, please.
Right, free translation, of course. Right,
yes.
I didn't forget that. And we're going to talk about another interesting topic today related to the world of books and printing and literature and this deep cultural thing of ideas that some people are trying to suppress. What are we talking about? I don't mean you trying to stop me from reading Harry Potter because it's too commercial. We're talking about something else, which you'll find out after the break. And of course, what comes before the break, Maria?
Well, the interlude, of course.
The obligatory musical interlude. Indeed. Take it away, Claire. So, part two of the show, the meat and drink of what we do. Take it away, Maria.
Okay, well, we've been to see an exhibition in the local printer, as it's called, I guess, or press.
Printing museum, I think is what you can call it.
Perhaps, yeah. So yeah, it's a place that, to be honest, I've never been to. It's not really very popular amongst the locals, as far as I know. Maybe I'm just being ignorant. Yeah, maybe when I was at school I went. I really can't remember. But it's an interesting place because they've got a few models of like different printers, from different periods, and that's actually quite cool to see. But really, the reason why we went this particular time was because of an exhibition on clandestine Polish.
Are you giggling because there's a Boy Scout Girl Guide tour?
I'm giggling because I know we're going to have to stop again. Just because there's so many people talking.
Yeah, they've stopped right in front of us, so we're gonna pause this right now and come back in 5 minutes. Okay, yeah, we're gonna have to stop this, wrap it up. We'll be back in just a moment. And we're back after changing location 5 times, escaping the Russians, not unlike Chechens or Ukrainians. We found our little spot for the podcast. So let's continue along the theme of the, actually appropriately enough, they were Russian, since we're talking about dissident literature,
Yeah.
clandestine publications of books and ideas, and authoritarian dictatorships. But next World Cup's in Russia, so I recommend going there. It'll all be fine. Nothing's going to happen, probably. So, what was?
Where was I?
Yeah, yes.
Is
Where
the
were
question.
you? Where were you?
Okay, yeah, the reason why we went there was because one exhibition on clandestine publications, basically that took place during the Civil War, Spanish Civil War, and the dictatorship. So, well, we knew pretty much, what to expect, I guess. We knew what sort of things that we were going to see, but yeah, I think it was still as fascinating to see those documents. I always find it quite thrilling, to see like the ways that in which people found, a way redundant to keep the freedom, freedom of speech, and to keep communicating their ideas and ideas. So yeah, that's always like very thrilling and very emotional to see, especially when it is about your own country. So I don't know. Well, I think perhaps it's a similar feeling for you. Even if you're not Spanish, but you know the history and you've lived here for a while, and I'm sure you can sort of like empathize not just with that, but also drawing parallels with history of your own country.
Well, we didn't really have much of a dissident press in Ireland compared to other cultures. But yeah, obviously, if you know anything about France and Voltaire and all those kind of writers, it has the same dynamics and a lot of help with and conspirators from outside the country as well. And if you're reading anything about even for my own country as well, yes, there are some aspects of it, but not on the same scale as what we saw in Spain or in that exhibition. Obviously, you had like a lot of social movements were publishing newspapers that weren't necessarily banned, or some were banned, but their similarities were to what we saw in the exhibition were basically that it had a very zealous tone. It was like call to action. They go out of publication periodically and then come back again, and very, much so they were always mouthpieces for the editor and for the movement as well, to rally the troops, as it were. And even I didn't have many examples of newspapers in that exhibition. You could see that kind of coming through as well. And the newspapers I'm referring to in Ireland were basically Jim Larkin's papers before in 1913, Strike and Lockout, back when we had a big socialist kind of philosophy in Irish nationalism as well, which still remains to this day, but not as kind of pronounced as it was back in the days of Larkin and James Connolly. And so it was used as a counter check as well to the official publications detailing abuses of workers and misdeeds of employers. And I'm sure the newspapers that were from that period in Spain that the exhibition was covering would have dealt with much of the same subject matter, no?
Yeah, well, I think there's kind of like two dimensions to it. One which is encircled within the whole, within the global sort of like workers' movements across Europe, and another one which refers to a specific situation here in Spain, which, in turn it is often like a situation here in the Spanish Civil War is often seen as kind of like a micro reality of what was going on in the entire world. Well, rightly or wrongly, this is what is often said. But
certainly a lot of people who are outside Spain who are writing about it during that period, so it's only fair that the people who are experiencing it directly and only natural, I suppose, that they were also contributing their own body of work and literature to that period, no?
I think within the exhibition you see the evolution of basically what is happening during the Civil War and the kind of like printing that is done at the time. to the moment where basically nothing can be printed here and it's all being done in Latin America. And then later on, smuggled into Spain, and how you can basically see the whole history of the period through that literature, through those pieces of writing.
Also in the exhibition, they said a lot of publishers, either openly or recklessly, were also contributing to the distribution of books. In other situations throughout history where you had this dynamic of censorship and illegal publication of books, I haven't really come across official publishers stepping in and actually actively being a part of that network of getting the books out there. So is Spain unique in that aspect, where publishing houses put their necks out more so than other cultures and other countries in other times of history?
See, at the risk of being stereotypical, the left is to groupie in some ways, usually identified with intellectuals and so on. So, I'm not claiming that they were the only ones that were involved in literature activity, of course, but there was an important sector of intellectuals that supported either like Republican or communist ideas or early socialist ideas. It kind of doesn't really come as a surprise to me that both, printers or publishing houses and the university or a certain sector of the university would be supported of that cause, really.
Okay. And also we saw some unique tricks hiding in plain sight, more or less books with covers of other books.
This was one of my favorite areas of the exhibition, to be honest, and I know it sounds quite frivolous because there were so many important and emotional things there, but that was actually quite, I don't know, it just makes you smile, how witty they were, hiding publications, and the funny thing is that some of them are completely trivial, like a manual of how to play hockey or football rules and so on. But then there are others that are really significant because they're quite very religious items, like volumes, or actually even strongly right-wing texts. So it's actually quite funny to be able to see what's inside compared to what the cover says it is. And there was actually, next to those volumes, there was also an explanation or an original piece of text when those books had been confiscated. And it described, it says it's prayers to Virgin Mary, but in reality it's a communist manifesto or whatever. So it's quite a curious thing to come across.
Another one's Franco, Savior of Spain. There's another book.
Yeah, exactly. And then inside is some instructions for workers to stand up and so on. So it's, I don't know. It's it kind of feels like they were the only tools that they had to fight with repression. So I think it's quite endearing to have an insight into that.
Was there a tolerance during the 1670s when obviously there was a dictatorship, but it wasn't as intense perhaps as the early days of the regime, and because it was so widespread, maybe they're very happy to turn a blind eye to it, and as long as they didn't see it directly, they didn't feel compelled to come down hard on it. Because it had just been too much work. It would have been impossible perhaps to put a stop to it. Do you think that was the case, or do you think there was a very firm zero tolerance policy towards it?
See, it all depends who you ask, really. It's like anything in Spain. It's really hard to write an objective history. I think there's a consensus that officially there's some kind of there were some freedom laws that came into effect in the 60s, and officially that sort of increased freedom of speech, freedom of press. And in fact, if you ask many people, they would say that was a great achievement by that particular minister who died a couple of years ago, and then revive the polemic of whether that law is actually that freeing or not. But then, well, for example, in the exhibition, it talked about it being just like purely cosmetic, and I think you just have to compare it to what was there before. You can't really judge it in terms of what we have today to a point, now like there's like the internet and so on, and it's it's far more open. But for what was available at the time, I guess in the 40s and 50s, I guess that was like some kind of step towards opening up the publications.
Okay. And was there any famous Spanish writers who left Spain during this period and wrote a lot about Spain in absentia?
Yeah, I mean, there were lots of writers that went into exile, mostly like to Latin American countries, and yeah, there's a great production. A lot of people from like generation 1927 went away. The generation of 36 obviously is marked by the Civil War. So yeah, I mean, a lot of people left just because they found it unbearable to be here, because they couldn't express their opinion, or also because they were so involved politically that it was really dangerous for them to stay, or they were imprisoned, like some of the people that were that featured in the video in the exhibition, with some poets and so on that had been stayed here and had been imprisoned by their beliefs.
Okay. And obviously names like Solzhenitsyn, Ring, the very famous examples of exiled writers, but perhaps Spanish writers haven't reached that level of awareness in a European context as a byword for writers ignoring suppression and prohibition, censorship.
Well, I think, for example, like the figure of Lorca, even if it's during the Civil War, I think it's like, world famous. And, well, later on, I think the issue was that, Spain was so close, really. I mean, a lot of like European countries had no idea like what things were like here, or, turned a blind eye because it was the lesser of two evils, in the age of trying to destroy communism and so on. So, yeah, perhaps that had an influence. But, I mean, I think there's definitely, like, big names there that anyone who knows a little bit about that struggle would know.
Okay, and finally there was a audiovisual segment to the exhibition as well, interviews with writers who are in jail, had published newspapers. Which is another thing as well, which I think has happened in lots of other countries, that whenever you're a political prisoner, it tends to produce a great body of literature as well, from Northern Irish prisoners of conscience, South Africans prisoners of conscience as well, and to here as well. So there's a lot of kind of interesting kind of personal reflections. Some were published very roughly by themselves, and others had a more of a professional sheen and look to it, and we saw kind of interviews with them as well, describing their times in them. And there's some poetry, current affairs, and now very old men, of course, but back in the day were fighting the power through the word, no?
Yeah, I think that part, like, I always find very emotional because, the people that even if now they're elderly, when they're telling you about what they did at university and how they opposed you, kind of like while I was watching that video, I was sort of imagining what they looked like when they were young, and with their like quiffs and so on, and V-neck jumpers, and particularly the poem I found like really, really emotional. The way that he recited it like by heart, and it was full of the strength of the feelings that he had when he was in prison. And I think it was a great insight into what life was like at the time, because I think now we just like take it for granted. But when he was reciting those verses, about like freedom that has like no boundaries, I think you could see like just how just how like not free they were, basically.
Well, yeah, also has more of an impact because socialists would have always spoken about the internationalism of their creed, but if you see it written down as a political statement or a newspaper headline, it's obviously dogma. But coming from a poem, which is a more personal space, it has more of an impact and effect on the person hearing it or reading it as well. So moving away from the politics of it as well, the stuff that was produced by these people had a more profound dimension to it. I think So yeah, it was for me. It was probably the best element of the exhibition as well. So that was very good. So I think we've covered it pretty extensively. So anything else you'd like to add before we go to the final part of the show?
Now we just encourage whoever is in Madrid to actually go and see it, or at least do some research about it.
And if you're not in Madrid, fly over. Cheap Ryanair flight, no excuses.
Yeah.
Flights directly to the Barajas airport, so taxi in, taxi out. Hostel if you're inclined to stay an extra night.
It's worth it.
Champions League football is back as well, so you might as well catch all the culture here in Spain.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
a flamenco show as well.
Sure.
And some of the tours in the Palacio Real area of Madrid.
Especially if you're Russian. I mean, it's very popular at the moment.
They're everywhere. They're not wearing standard issue military uniform either, so that's against UN regulations. So that's the end of this part of the show. We'll see you momentarily, and you will hear us equally as momentarily.
Yes, I can't believe I said that.
That's so funny. Whoa. Oh, you should tell those jokes on air, between the breaks, just so that you can share that humor with people. Just saw a girl walk past in a wedding dress. You think she's actually a bride, or she's just like some kind of catalogue model? Or like.
She might be one of these like parade around in disguise, like for people to take a photo with. They just make their money like
This
that.
isn't Japan. They haven't in
Well,
Japan.
we just see like two flamenco dancers in a bullfight.
Yeah, this is Spain though, so those people just walk around anyway, doing their weekly shop, in their work clothes. Do you ever buy a packet of pears in your office clothes on the way home from class?
Not in bridal clothes. That's
Yeah.
what you were talking about.
Yeah, well, bullfighter might be coming home from the
I would
bullfight. And it's like we're like, 9 to 5 flamenco
Sure.
office job, gotta pick up some milk,
Yeah.
walk around a bit, can't wait to get out of these clothes when I get home, that kind of thing.
With a Ronaldo strip.
Whatever Ronaldo strip as well.
I've
So,
seen that as well.
okay, so it was a very interesting discussion. Thank you so much for giving me your thoughtful insight and feedback
Thank you too.
in the main body of the podcast. It really was fascinating and illuminating, I have to say. So next week's topic, as of always, is a mystery, but we will be, well, you talk about the 3D camera there, what have we been doing with it?
Mostly we've been getting it wrong.
That's true.
But no, we've just been practicing with it and like trying to record some videos. I think we've got a hang of it now, and it's gonna look really good.
Okay, excellent. And another question, if we see people with guidebooks around the place, should we go over and help them find what they're looking for?
Nah.
Exactly, part of the adventure, let them find it for themselves. Okay, that wraps up another intriguing installment of the Elaborate Podcast. Join us next week on Podcast Thursday. But this being a podcast, you probably could listen to this on any day, Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, even on Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday, or Thursday as well. So it's the end from Elaborate Podcast and the Elaborate Academy, that is as well, saying bye-bye.
And Maria saying bye.
What comes now?
Jingle.
the musical
No.
outro.
Yeah.
So
okay,
there.
Yeah, whatever.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
You're listening to Subsound Radio. We bring you streaming and live broadcasting from the capital. This is the El Arpa Podcast.